If you think living under an HOA means peaceful neighborhoods and well-trimmed lawns, bless your heart. In my town, it meant a pack of clipboard-wielding tyrants deciding if your grass was 1 inch too high and slapping you with a $250 fine, if it was. And when I refused to bow down, they didn't just fine me. They shut off my water supply right in the middle of a record-breaking Texas drought. But don't worry, they thought they were cutting me off. What they didn't know was I had a plan that would make Karen's little power trip blow up right in her smug, sunburnt face. It all started last summer when the HOA decided to beautify the neighborhood. And by beautify, I mean they wanted to make every yard look exactly the same, like a row of cheap plastic soldiers in a model train set. Now I've lived on my little corner lot for nearly 25 years. Planted every tree myself built. The garden beds put in a hand-dug well back before the HOA even existed. This was my place. I wasn't about to tear out my vegetable garden and cover everything with chemically fertilized sod just because Karen from the board said it didn't fit the neighborhood aesthetic. At first, they came with letters, gentle reminders that my tomatoes were unapproved vegetation and my raised beds were non-compliant landscaping features. Then came the citations, 100 here, 150 there, because apparently growing your own food is now considered a nuisance under their new Amendment 14B. Funny thing about Amendment 14B, it got passed after a special meeting where no one except Karen's cronies got invited. Convenient, huh? Still, I figured, pay a few fines, keep my head down, ride it out. I wasn't looking for a war, but war came anyway. One afternoon, I came home from running errands and noticed something strange. The sprinklers weren't running. I went around back. Nothing from the hoses, checked inside, no water pressure. That's when I found the bright orange notice taped to my door. Water service suspended due to non-compliance, contact HOA board for reinstatement. I called the water company. They said they had no record of any service disruption because the HOA controls our private utility infrastructure. Translation, Karen had literally ordered the maintenance guys to shut off my line. They hadn't cut off everyone's water, just mine. Because apparently selectively starving out the troublemakers is how they handle things around here. I could almost hear Karen's voice in my head. If he wants to grow his silly little tomatoes so badly, let's see how he does it without water. Oh, she thought she was clever. She thought she'd won. What she didn't know was while she was busy playing HOA dictator, I was reading the bylaws and I found a loophole bigger than Karen's hairdo at the last HOA mixer. See, the HOA rules only controlled water supplied through their system. Nothing in there said a word about alternative water sources. And lucky for me, I happen to know a thing or two about alternative energy. 20 years as an engineer for a solar power company tends to leave you with a few tricks up your sleeve. I wasn't just going to fight back. I was going to make sure Karen and every other plastic-smiled board member could see me doing it every time they stepped onto their sun-scorched driveways. And it was going to be glorious. Now, setting up a solar water system wasn't exactly a weekend project, but I'd be darned if I was going to let Karen and her clipboard mafia dry out my land. First things first, I needed a water source. Lucky for me, the property still had an old well capped years ago when the HOA pushed everyone onto their community water system. Translation, a private utility where they could charge whatever they wanted. The HOA had strongly discouraged using private wells, but funny enough, they never legally banned them. Probably because they thought no one would be stubborn enough to fight them. Well, they hadn't met me. I got to work. Hired a licensed well inspector, a buddy of mine from way back, to come take a look. Still good, he said, knocking the side of the casing. Might need a little TLC, but she'll run perfect. Next step, power. Now, I could have just wired up an electric pump, but then I'd still be at the mercy of the HOA-controlled power grid. Not gonna happen. Instead, I ordered a top-of-the-line solar pump system, the kind they use on remote ranches out in West Texas where folks are miles from the nearest utility pole. Cost me about $7,000 all in, but it was worth every penny. Panels, inverter, battery, backup, smart controller, the whole 9 yards. Enough power to run my well day and night without drawing so much as a single watt from the HOA. Completely off-grid, completely legal. The best part, there wasn't a darn thing Karen could do about it. Now here's where it gets real juicy. I didn't just hook up a basic hose and call it a day. Oh no, sir. If I was going to make a point, I was going to make it loud and clear. I installed a full drip irrigation system branching out to every inch of my garden, my trees, my front yard. Heck, I even rigged up a small decorative fountain right by the sidewalk just to rub it in a little. Picture this. Every house on my street, their lawns brown and brittle under the brutal summer sun, gardens, dead flower beds empty, and right smack in the middle, my property, an oasis of lush green, sparkling water, and blooming color. I didn't have to put up a sign. I didn't have to say a word. Everyone who drove by could see the message plain as day. You can't starve out someone who knows how to make their own rain. Of course, Karen lost her ever-loving mind. First, it was the emails. Dear homeowner, your recent unauthorized landscaping modifications are in violation of Section 12.4 of the HOA guidelines. I framed that one and hung it over my workbench. Then came the threats. Failure to comply will result in daily fines of $500. But here's the thing. The landscaping modifications they cited, they only applied to structures, fences, sheds, that sort of thing. Watering your own plants, not covered. Every fine they tried to slap on me, I challenged. Every letter they sent, I responded with a certified letter of my own citing chapter and verse of the HOA bylaws. I knew their rules better than they did, and I wasn't afraid to use them. Karen even tried to sic the city code enforcement officer on me. Poor guy showed up, took one look at my permits and paperwork, tipped his hat and said, "You're good, sir. Have a nice day." Oh, the look on Karen's face when he walked away smiling. If satisfaction had a flavor, that moment tasted like a 32-ounce T-bone steak, grilled medium rare. But here's where things really took a turn. See, when you live in an HOA, there's always a lot of whispering behind closed doors. Gossip travels faster than fire through dry brush. And pretty soon other neighbors started coming by. Quietly at first, "Hey," they'd say, glancing over their shoulders. "How'd you get your water back on?" I'd show them my solar setup, explain the well, talk about the loopholes. And just like that, a little movement started. First, it was just my next-door neighbor, Mr. Thompson. Then the couple across the street. Then 3 more families. They didn't want to live under Karen's thumb anymore either. And suddenly the HOA board, which had always ruled by fear and fines, started facing a rebellion. You could almost feel the power slipping out of Karen's French manicured hands. Of course, Karen didn't take that lying down. She called an emergency board meeting, pushed through a water source compliance initiative. Basically, it was a desperate attempt to require HOA approval for any alternative irrigation systems. But guess what? Changing the bylaws required a 2/3 majority vote from the homeowners. And thanks to all the people I'd helped, she didn't have the votes anymore, not even close. In fact, not only did her measure fail, it triggered a petition to recall her from the board, which according to the HOA's own charter only needed signatures from 30% of homeowners to force a vote. Within 2 weeks, we had double that. Karen was about to face the very public, very humiliating downfall she so richly deserved. You'd think after getting smacked down so hard at the board meeting, Karen would have gotten the message. You know, maybe reflect on her life choices. Maybe go take up knitting or bird watching, something harmless. But no, Karen doubled down because a true HOA. Karen never admits defeat. She just gets sneakier. It started small. Weird things happening around my property. One morning I found the gate to my well house standing wide open, padlock cut clean off. Another day I noticed someone had kicked over 2 of my solar panels, snapping the mounting brackets clean in half. Cost me a few $100 to replace. At first I thought maybe it was just teenagers messing around. But after the 3rd accident, when the main water line from my pump got cleanly sliced with a hacksaw, I knew this wasn't random. This was sabotage. And who had the biggest motive? Who had already proven she wasn't above dirty tricks? That's right, Karen. Now here's the thing about property damage. It's a real crime. Not just an HOA fine, actual, honest-to-God, criminal charges territory. So I did what any sensible man would do. I installed cameras. Discrete ones, battery-powered wireless hidden in birdhouses and tree trunks. Full 1080p resolution, night vision, motion-triggered recording the works. And sure enough, less than a week later, I caught her clear as day. Karen in her little pink tracksuit and oversized sunglasses sneaking onto my lot around midnight. Bolt cutters in one hand, a hacksaw in the other, like some kind of suburban cat burglar. If cat burglars drove Range Rovers and wore orthopedic sneakers, I could have called the police right then, had her arrested, dragged her into court. But honestly, that felt too easy, too small, no? I wanted everyone, and I mean everyone, to see Karen for what she really was. And as it turns out, I wasn't the only one. Remember how I mentioned someone was poking around the HOA's finances? Yeah, it turns out Karen had been cooking the books for years, skimming off landscaping contracts, overcharging homeowners for emergency repairs that never happened, charging us $75 a month for a security patrol that turned out to be her nephew driving around in his '98 Honda Civic. And best of all, there was paperwork, emails, invoices, bank statements, every dirty little detail laid out nice and neat. So we put together a plan. First, we called a special homeowners meeting. Legally, we were allowed to if we got 25% of homeowners to sign a petition, and by now, half the neighborhood couldn't wait to see Karen taken down. We booked the local library meeting room, sent out official notices, made sure it was all by the book. Then on the night of the meeting, we brought receipts. Literal ones. We printed out all the evidence, projected it onto a giant screen, laid it all out step by step. How Karen had used HOA funds to pay for her personal landscaping, how she had approved emergency assessments without proper votes, how she manipulated elections by losing mail-in ballots from anyone who disagreed with her. And then just when the room was good and boiling over with outrage, I played the footage, the video of Karen trespassing, vandalizing my well-dead silence. You could have heard a pin drop. Then Mrs. Jenkins from Lot 17, sweet little lady in her 80s, leaned forward and said in the clearest voice I've ever heard, "Throw her out." The recall vote wasn't even close. Out of 72 homes, 68 voted to remove Karen immediately. The other 4 abstained because, honestly, they were probably scared. Within 48 hours, she was officially stripped of her title. A special election was scheduled to replace her. And Karen, she was facing criminal charges for trespassing, vandalism, and financial fraud. Last I heard, she was trying to sell her house to cover her legal bills. Good luck with that. It's hard to find buyers when your reputation smells like 3-day-old roadkill. In July. Meanwhile, life in the neighborhood changed almost overnight. No more stupid fines for planting tomatoes. No more threats over mailbox paint colors. No more nasty letters about the shade of mulch in your flower beds. Instead, people actually started talking again, waving from their porches, sharing extra veggies from their gardens. We even threw a big block party. First one in 20 years. Barbecue, live music. Fireworks, the works. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't some Disney movie ending, but it was real and it was ours. And me, well, I still get up every morning, pour myself a cup of black coffee, and walk out to the edge of my property. I stand there for a minute, just looking at that fountain, burbling away the sprinklers misting over my tomatoes, the sun glinting off my solar panels, and I smile. Because every drop of water, every blade of green, every juicy red tomato is one more reminder that freedom isn't something you ask permission for. It's something you build with your own 2 hands. You'd think after getting kicked off the HOA board and slapped with criminal charges, Karen would finally crawl off into whatever dark little cave she'd come from. But no, Karen wasn't just a sore loser. She was a delusional sore loser, because even after everything, after the recall vote, after the police reports, after the public humiliation at the community meeting, Karen still believed she could get her throne back. Her plan? Oh, it was a real doozy. She filed a lawsuit against the entire HOA, claimed the recall election was invalid, accused the homeowners of defamation, harassment, and emotional distress, demanded reinstatement to the board, and for good measure, $500,000 in damages for pain and suffering. You heard that right? The woman who shut off my water, vandalized my property, and stole from her own neighbors thought we owed her $500,000. Now, if this sounds like something cooked up by a drunk raccoon with a law degree printed off the internet, well, you're not far off, because the first thing her lawyer, a guy who advertised affordable legal services on bus stop benches, apparently forgot to tell her was this: when you sue, you open yourself up to discovery, which meant all the evidence we had, the videos, the financial records, the witness statements, the emails. All of it was now officially part of the court record, public record, available to anyone who cared enough to look, like, say, future employers or mortgage lenders or local newspapers. And believe me, folks cared. The court date rolled around about 3 months later. It wasn't even a close fight. Karen showed up in a power suit 2 sizes too tight, clutching a stack of handwritten notes and looking like she hadn't slept in weeks. Our side. We showed up calm, organized, armed to the teeth, with evidence and led by an actual real lawyer, the son of Mr. Thompson from next door, who just happened to specialize in real estate law. The look on Karen's face when she saw him walk into the courtroom, worth every penny. The judge listened patiently to Karen's tearful rambling story, nodded a few times, asked a few polite questions, then he turned to our lawyer. It took about 20 minutes, 20 glorious minutes for him to lay out the entire case, the embezzlement, the harassment, the sabotage, the fraud. When he finished, the judge looked at Karen like he was trying to figure out if she was actually serious. His ruling swift and brutal. Karen's lawsuit, dismissed with prejudice, meaning she couldn't refile it, ordered to pay court costs and attorney's fees for wasting everyone's time, referred her for criminal prosecution on multiple felony counts. Oh, and he added a nice little cherry on top. A permanent restraining order barring her from entering any HOA-related meetings or holding any position of authority in any residential community association ever again. Anywhere ever. Karen wasn't just dethroned, she was exiled. But wait, it gets better. While all this was going on, the neighborhood had been busy doing some housekeeping of its own. See, once Karen was gone, we realized something important. The HOA's original bylaws, the ones Karen had manipulated and weaponized, were a disaster. Confusing, contradictory, easy to abuse. So we decided to fix that. We brought in a professional management company to help rewrite everything from scratch. Clear rules, fair enforcement, transparency about where every single dollar was going. We added protections too. Term limits for board members, no more lifetime dictatorships, mandatory open elections, strict financial oversight, a homeowner's bill of rights. It wasn't easy. It took months of meetings, drafts, debates, but by the end we had something we could all be proud of. Not a perfect system, nothing ever is, but a community built on trust, respect, and actual neighborliness. Imagine that. And Karen, well, the last I heard, she tried moving into a condo complex one town over, tried to run for the HOA board there too. Word got out about her history before she even finished unpacking. She didn't last a month. Poetic, isn't it? As for me, these days my garden is bigger than ever. I added a second fountain just for the heck of it. The solar pump hums away quietly day and night, keeping everything green and growing. Sometimes when I'm out there pulling weeds or picking tomatoes, new neighbors will stop by. Ask about the solar setup. Ask how we turn things around. And I always tell them the same thing. You don't win by shouting louder. You win by knowing the rules better, by standing your ground, and by watering your own dang garden, no matter how hard they try to shut you down. Because that's what freedom really is. Not fancy speeches, not power plays, just a little bit of stubbornness, a little bit of smarts, and a whole lot of hard work. You'd think after getting booted from the HOA, humiliated in court, and slapped with a permanent restraining order, Karen would finally accept defeat. You'd think, but remember, this is Karen we're talking about. The woman could have lost a game of checkers and still declared herself queen of the board, so when all her official channels closed, she did what desperate people always do. She went rogue. It started with anonymous complaints. Suddenly, every little thing on my property was getting reported to the city. Unlicensed water feature, unauthorized solar array, environmental hazard due to non-traditional landscaping. Each complaint triggered an inspection. Each inspection found absolutely nothing wrong because, surprise, surprise, I'd done everything by the book from the start. Permits, approvals, code, compliance, all locked up tighter than a Fort Knox vault. The city inspector even started joking about it. One day after poking around my tomato plants and solar panels for the third time that month, he said, "Honestly, sir, if everyone in this county kept their properties half as clean and legal as you, my job would be a whole lot easier." He even offered to write me a letter of commendation, which I proudly hung right next to Karen's original violation notice, a little homegrown art gallery, if you will. But Karen wasn't done yet. Next came the smear campaign flyers tucked into mailboxes late at night. Dangerous illegal wells, toxic chemicals poisoning the groundwater. Solar panels causing cancer. Wild stuff straight out of the tinfoil hat playbook. At first, a few folks got nervous. Questions started popping up at community meetings, so I invited everyone over for a garden tour. Opened up the well house, showed them the sealed, inspected equipment, handed out copies of the city's clean water report, even gave out free tomatoes. Bribery may be effective, you bet. By the end of the week, nobody was buying Karen's crazy stories anymore. If anything, she just made herself look worse, way worse. And then the grand finale. One night, someone snuck onto my property, tried to smash the main solar inverter. They didn't get far. The motion lights snapped on alarms, started blaring, and half the block came pouring out of their houses. Guess who they caught standing there frozen with a brick in her hand? That's right, Karen. This time there were no deals, no quiet warnings, no polite apologies. She was arrested on the spot. Trespassing, attempted vandalism, violation of a restraining order. The works, and because she was already on probation from the earlier charges, the judge didn't go easy. Sentenced her to 6 months in county jail, plus another 2 years of supervised probation, community service, mandatory mental health counseling. Oh, and a permanent note on her record, which meant she couldn't serve on any HOA board, town committee, or even a PTA ever again. Karen's days of petty tyranny were officially blessedly over. The neighborhood threw another party after that. This time it wasn't just a barbecue, it was a celebration. Balloons, streamers, homemade Karen free zone signs, kids running around with garden hoses, old-timers laughing over lawn chairs and lemonade. Live music played by a local bluegrass band who did a special cover of Hit the Road Jack, dedicated to her. It was the happiest I'd seen the place in 20 years. People had their pride back, their freedom, their sense of community. And me, I felt something else too. Not just satisfaction, not just relief, hope, real, honest-to-goodness hope. That maybe, just maybe, people could stand up for themselves and win. Since then, things have been good. The new HOA board is made up of neighbors who actually, talk to people before making decisions. They focus on things that matter. Keeping the roads repaired, organizing events, helping elderly home owners with maintenance. Nobody cares if your rose bushes are 2 inches too tall. Nobody's measuring your grass with a ruler, and nobody's shutting off anyone's water just because they dared to plant tomatoes instead of petunias. Imagine that. As for my property, the garden's bigger than ever. I expanded the solar system, added panels, batteries, even a little backup for emergencies, installed rainwater harvesting tanks, built a greenhouse for winter growing. What started out as a fight for survival turned into something even better. Independence, total, beautiful, untouchable independence. And every time I walk out there past the humming solar array, the fountain splashing in the sunlight, the rows of corn and tomatoes and squash, I think about everything we went through. The fines, the threats, the sabotage, the lawsuits, and I smile because every inch of this place, I earned it, we earned it, and nobody, no Karen, no clipboard, no petty tyrant can ever take that away again. Looking back now, it's easy to laugh about it. The sabotage, the lawsuits, the pink tracksuits, but living through it. Let me tell you, it was one of the toughest fights of my life. And you know what I learned? Bullies don't always come kicking down your door. Sometimes they come with a clipboard, a fake smile, and a rule book they twist to suit themselves. They count on you being too tired, too scared, too isolated. They think if they throw enough fines, threats, and red tape at you, you'll give up. You'll fold. You'll surrender your little piece of freedom without a fight. But here's the truth. Freedom isn't handed to you. You have to build it. You have to protect it. Sometimes you have to fight like hell for it. And the best way to fight back, know the rules better than they do. Stand your ground calmly, smartly, and publicly. Shine a light so bright that their dirty tricks have nowhere to hide. It wasn't just about a garden. It wasn't even about water. It was about the principle that nobody, not a Karen, not an HOA, not anybody gets to decide how you live your life on your own land without a darn good reason. It was about community too, about neighbors standing together when it mattered most, about remembering that sometimes the real power isn't in the rule book, it's in each other. Maybe you're sitting there right now thinking, man, I've got a Karen in my life too. Maybe it's a petty boss. Maybe it's a crooked HOA board. Maybe it's a neighbor who thinks they own the whole street. If that's you, if you've ever felt bullied, boxed in, pushed around, I want you to hear me real clear. You are not powerless. You are smarter, stronger, and more stubborn than they ever gave you credit for. You just have to be willing to dig deep, get a little creative, and never ever let them steal your sunshine. I'd love to hear your story too. Have you ever had to stand up to a bully in your neighborhood? Had a crazy run-in with an out-of-control HOA? Pulled off your own little victory against the odds? Drop your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and I know a lot of folks here could use a little encouragement and inspiration. And hey, if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who could use a good laugh, or a little reminder that David can still beat Goliath every now and then. Thanks for riding along with me. Until next time, keep your gardens green, your solar panels clean, and your spirits even higher. See you down the road.